Hello everyone, it's the storyteller here. I've prepared something slow, eerie, and sleep-friendly for you tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Are you drifting off already, or still wide awake? Cockroach Girl. The floor underneath. Barry shuddered and swayed as they took a tight corner. The clattering whoosh of the dark tunnel drowned out the tired silence of the other commuters. Barry's sweaty hand threatened to slide loose from its cold metal pole, so he adjusted his grip and tried not to think about what had made it so sticky. Multiple people had relieved themselves in this car over the course of the day. The sickly sweet mixture of vomit and tangy excrement churned his stomach, threatening to dislodge the chopped salad he'd had for lunch that afternoon. Barry felt the gray-haired woman next to him shift away from his lifted arm in disgust. He enjoyed the small reprieve of the starchy fabric peeling away from the wetness of his underarm, where it had been chafing all day. There was nothing to be done, he thought bitterly, unless she wanted him falling into her lap. He could smell the baby powder wafting up from her hair, and the crusty perfume from a bottle that should have been thrown out years ago. Barry threatened to go flaccid at the idea of her wrinkled, fat body jiggling under her itchy wool cardigan. She should be so lucky, he thought with a sneer. Barry turned his attention back to the more desirable object of his affection, the girl at the other end of the car. He felt hot blood rush toward the front of his groin, making it bulge against his tight polyester dress pants so hard he could feel the metal zipper of his fly dig into him. Barry couldn't take his eyes off her proper legs pushed together in an effort to take up as little space as possible and attract as little attention as possible. Her tight, office-appropriate skirt hugged her hips and thighs, exposing bare legs, freshly shaven. He could tell from here she squirmed under his gaze. Barry adjusted his pants, even though no one on the bus was looking at him. He liked feeling like a potential threat. Barry knew he wasn't trash like the vermin around him. They all followed the rules. They went to work in their maze-like offices. They ate paste from tubes that barely resembled food. Humans were supposed to be apex predators, but the people who pressed in around him, jostled by the winding track, were so distant from their glorious biological potential, so detached from the instincts sharpened by thousands of generations of violence, that they had allowed their senses to dull irreparably from disuse, content to compete for scraps like the insects they were. But not Barry. He was in touch with his higher animal self. He used his God-given senses every day. And today, they were homing in on a target worthy of his attention. A girl he could tell would be a challenge. A girl who would force him to prove his manhood. A girl unlike the rest of them. This girl had her attention not on her phone, but on a book open in her lap. Barry craved the opportunity to see the title she was so engrossed in. He made a mental note to get closer to her when she got up for her stop. He also felt a surge of jealousy towards that book. He wanted to be the one who was in her lap, pulling her head back by the hair, taking what was his. The train jostled again as it went through another turn. The girl shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She knew he was watching her, yet she refused to meet his gaze. Barry found himself starting to get angry at her insolence. He deserved her attention. As if in response to his escalating need, the girl brought her hand up to her skirt. Barry's attention became rapt and utterly focused. The hairs on his arm stood up in arousal as he watched her, not daring to move, wondering if this was real. The girl reached underneath her tight little skirt and squirmed around. She had to be putting on a show. Otherwise, why would she do this? Barry glanced around, checking to see if anyone else was watching, but no one seemed to notice. The girl reached her hand all the way up between her legs, her expression unchanging, her eyes never leaving her book. Barry was now stroking himself outside his pants. He didn't care if anyone saw him. She was making him do this. The filthy little. The girl removed her hand from between her legs and pulled her arm out from under her skirt. She was holding something in the flat palm of her hand. Barry squinted and peered closer to see what it was. He stepped back in shock and confusion. Sitting in the girl's hand, antennae twitching, was a thick, 4-inch long, glittering cockroach. Its hard-shelled body, spiny legs, and beady head were unmistakable. The girl let it fall to the floor of the train, all without removing her eyes from her book. The cockroach skittered towards Barry. He let out an involuntary yelp that caused some passengers to finally look up and notice him. A businessman unceremoniously stepped on the cockroach, smushing its guts into an unrecognizable blob. The girl never looked up from her book. Barry wasn't a bad guy. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but he needed answers. So, when the girl got off at her stop, he followed her. They emerged from the underground station onto a dark street. There was no moon out that night, and the glow of the street lamps were obscured by overgrown trees. The girl walked ahead of him, handbag slung over her shoulder. When they were finally far enough from the main road, where no one could see or hear them, he picked up his pace to catch up with her. Barry's footsteps crunched the leaves and twigs on the sidewalk, so his approach was anything but silent. He could see her tense up. Barry grabbed her by the shoulder and spun her around to look at him. He took a step back in surprise. There was no fear in the girl's eyes. It unsettled him. They usually looked more scared. He pressed on anyway. "What was that back there?" Barry asked. "What was what?" "That thing. Did you pull a cockroach out from between your..." Barry gestured helplessly at his own crotch. He couldn't believe what he was asking. "I think you should leave me alone." The girl turned around to continue walking, but Barry wasn't done with her. He grabbed her arm. "I think you should answer my question." "I don't owe you anything," the girl said, looking him dead in the eye. This disturbed Barry more than he cared to admit. They usually struggled to avoid his gaze. He was in uncharted territory, but he couldn't turn back now. His cock twitched hungrily. Maybe this could be fun, Barry tried to convince himself. He could break her. That would make this feel more earned, more challenging. He had been starting to get bored with his targets. Centuries of comfort and complacency had left the modern woman weak and pathetic. "I'm not done with you yet," he told her. Barry pushed the girl up against the retaining wall next to the sidewalk. This was usually when they screamed, but the girl didn't scream. She pushed him back. "Get off of me," she said forcefully, but Barry would not. He could not. He had come so far. He needed to know. He wasn't just here to satisfy his own primal needs. No, not this time. He needed to know what she had down there, what she was hiding from him, how she was able to produce. The girl kneed him in the groin, but Barry was not an amateur at this. He expertly leaned back to avoid a direct hit while still keeping his forearm against her chest, pinning her up against the wall. He pushed her knee to the side. "Hold still," Barry told her through gritted teeth. He was starting to get angry. "This will all be over soon." At last, he managed to reach up under her skirt and pull her underwear to the side. She had stopped struggling. He was grateful. Once they were convinced that there was no way out of this, they always ended up enjoying it. They would never admit it, but he could tell that they did. The girl was looking at him again, calmly. "Don't do that," Barry told her. "Don't do what?" "Look at me like that." The girl laughed. "You can't control me," she told him. "You're a dead man." Barry slapped her across the face. It was his turn to laugh. It was a humorless, forced laugh, mostly designed to disguise his fear. "You don't know who I am," he told her, more to convince himself than her. "You don't know my name. They'll never find me." Barry put his fingers in the space between her legs, relaxing into his victory. She was smooth, freshly shaven, just as he had predicted. But there was something else in there he could feel as he unzipped his pants and got himself out and ready. Something plasticky. A Nuva ring, perhaps. Or he didn't have much time to guess. The thing crawled straight out of the girl's vagina and onto his hand. Barry recoiled and flung it to the ground with a yell. What the fuck?" "Does that answer your question?" said the girl. "Crazy bitch." Barry's head was spinning. He had no idea how she did this magic trick. and he had no desire to stick around and find out. He grabbed his dick to put it back into his pants, but the girl grabbed onto him harder. "Hang on," she said. "I'm not done with you yet." She parted her knees invitingly. The girl once again pulled her lacy underwear to the side, fully exposing herself. Barry watched in horror as a beady little head and spiny legs clawed their way out of her, the antennae releasing themselves from her depths with a little bounce. It eagerly ran down the inside of her thigh, down her leg, all the way to the ground. It was followed by another and another and another. Some of them scampered down her thighs to the ground, then over to Barry's shoes, then up his pant leg. He tried to pull away, but she had his hard dick in her hand with a vice grip and wouldn't let him go. Why did it stay hard while he was so afraid? Why wouldn't his body listen to him? Barry didn't want this. Other cockroaches climbed out of her and crawled up her thigh, over the edge of her skirt, up her chest, and onto her shoulder, down her arm, all the way to his exposed flesh. They swarmed all over his body. Barry screamed. They made their way up his neck to his face, their delicate, spiny legs tingling his skin, causing Barry to jerk in violent fear and revulsion. He shut his mouth tight and continued to scream with it closed. No matter. The insects pushed in between, prying his lips open. Barry finally succeeded in yanking his penis out of her hands. He didn't care if it broke or if she peeled all of the skin off of it. He just needed to get out of there. But the cockroaches kept coming. The swarm grew bigger and bigger, finding their way underneath his clothes, into every orifice available to them. They overpowered him. Barry couldn't hold them out any longer. He covered his ears, but that left his eyes and nose and rectum exposed. Barry stumbled to his feet and fell to the ground. He choked on them. He could feel them with every sense of his body and brain, wriggling their way inside of him, unwelcome, filthy, suffocating. Time slowed for Barry. He knew only fear and blinding pain. The girl watched, impassive, as Barry lay twitching on the ground. During those final minutes of consciousness, Barry was freed from any stress, repression, self-loathing, or desire. It took 7 minutes for him to die. After Barry's body grew still, the girl picked her purse up off the ground where it had fallen. She hung it back on her shoulder and continued up the sidewalk on her way home. She left her babies behind to nibble at his corpse. Eventually, they got bored. The cockroaches scampered off into the night to scavenge for bits of food hoisted into the dumpsters behind the dimly lit bars and tightly locked apartment buildings. Their grotesque image kept them safe. Fear kept them hidden. Disgust allowed them to move freely, unbothered in the shadows of the city. Like the girl, they were survivors. Dream time. The barren charcoal seas of Mare Crisium span the horizon in all directions. The vast Picard crater is the only natural feature of this desolate landscape. Its high outer ridges cast a long shadow across the crash site as our white, hot star races towards sunset and lunar night approaches. "Harper, put your jumper on," says Mama's voice. "It's getting cold." The earth looms large in the sky, about 20 times more massive than it should be. I take small, slow steps towards it, transfixed. That shouldn't be there. It's too close. Our planet is spinning rapidly. Each day only lasts 3 seconds. With each rotation, this beautiful blue marble becomes ever more obscured by wildfire smoke, noxious gases, and nuclear fallout, until the permacloud forms and engulfs our home world, suffocating my view. I leap up high in desperation and reach with straining fingertips for the earth. Floating 10 feet above the lunar surface, a gravitational tug of war fights over me. The mighty planet wants me to come home, but the proximity of the moon wins this match, pulling me back gently to its dusty surface. Our stricken Orion X command module now lies before me, casting a great silhouette across the faint backdrop of our galaxy. This impressive machine towers over me, yet we are both still dwarfed by the endless nothingness of the lunar surface and the infinite space beyond. I hesitate at the entrance hatch door. A familiar tightness across my chest warns me to back away. Death is close. But a promise is a promise, so I force a quivering hand against the frozen palm port scanner. Nothing happens straight away. But sure enough, the warmth of my touch thaws the device until the emergency lighting illuminates the sensor pad and the outer hatch slides open. Taking a deep breath of nothing, I step in, shiver, and rub my arms as a ghostly chill runs through me. The inner airlock door is wide open to the main chamber. The lunar colony raiders who downed our ship have stripped it of all equipment. It's just a broken shell now, like me. This is usually the point when I awake, sweating and panicking. But this time is different somehow. This time, I'm ready to accept what has happened, to accept what I must do. Willing myself onwards, I creep around the other side of the central seating column. Burnsy's body is still strapped into his flight chair in full EVA suit, just as we were forced to leave him. The helmet visor is smashed, and I recoil at the sight of my dead friend's face. His one good remaining brown eye stares at me without seeing me. His features are perfectly preserved in the vacuum of space, with no oxygen or bacteria to do their worst. "All right, Harper," says Burnsy in his musical Welsh accent. "Took you long enough. Fancy taking this helmet off for me." Icy tears freeze upon my cheeks. "But I'll need to pull that shard out from your eye first. I'm bled out already. Just go for it." So I grip the metal fragment, once part of the ship's outer hull, with one hand and brace the other against Burnsy's forehead. There's a squelching sound as I ease it out from his eye socket. The gooey remains of his eyeball and some flesh and brain matter come out with it, making me retch. Burnsy doesn't move or make a sound until I have freed the 10-inch bloody dagger from his skull. I fling it away from us, exhale in relief, then twist off his cracked helmet. A pool of congealed blood oozes out with a sickly metallic stench. I throw up over my prison scrubs. "Ah, that's better. Cheers, mate," says Burnsy. "Hey, what's with the outfit?" "Solitary confinement. 1 year for sabotaging the mission." "Well, that's bollocks," he says. "It was your father, again. You weren't to know he was in league with those colonist bastards." I nod grimly, then clean my hands as best I can on my soiled uniform. Then, with great care, I remove both of his gloves and hold his freezing hands in mine. "I'm so sorry, Burnsy. I gave him the launch codes. It's all my fault." He reaches out to touch my cheek. "No, it's not. Your father tricked and betrayed you. Betrayed all of us. Come on now. No use crying. His love and compassion are more than I deserve. Tears are easy to wipe away. Guilt is not." I collapse into his strong, welcome arms. "I've missed you so much. I'll never forgive myself. Harper, this is not on you. Honestly, let it go." His undead hands gently prise me away, then undo his harness buckle. Taking my hands again, the body of Morgan Burns stands up. "Now let me go. It's time. I'm ready." I shake my head. "I'm not." He holds out an old-fashioned, wooden-handled spade towards me. "We promised each other, remember? It's time." Taking the spade in one hand, I turn to face the exit hatch. Come on then. We step out onto the moon's black surface. My whole body convulses, and teeth start chattering. So I put on the old green woolly jumper and sheepskin boots that Mama keeps by the veranda. Then Burnsy and I head out for a nighttime stroll under the stars. Hand in hand, we walk across the dusty front yard, past the crooked gum tree and battered old tire swing I once loved so much. We continue past the empty, rusty cattle pens and into the outback. The sweet honey aroma of golden wattle trees fills the night air. This is just how I remember it. before the great firestorm, rose everything to ashes. With the darkness of a new moon above, the magnificent celestial arc of the Milky Way rises above the domed silhouettes of the distant Kata Chuta peaks. "Is this where you grew up?" asks Bernsey. "Partly. This was Grandpa's station and the ancestral homeland of Nana Kira. We rest under the canopy of a pale river red gum tree, where Nana used to tell my cousins and me Dreamtime stories. Here, by this creek." "Perfect," says Bernsey. "We were happy, weren't we? In Australia, his face is healed. Younger. Like from our R&D lab days back in Perth. His long, dark, matted hair is back, as are the memories of those raucous times." My cautious smile turns into a big grin. "Those were the best days. Remember the nights out we had? With Eddie, Kathy, and the gang? They were proper banging, eh?" he says. "How about them drinking games we played? Like Moose and One Lifeboat. What? All the games that you instigated? Not to mention those rude rugby chants you had us singing through the streets after closing time. We laugh until we cry. Then we just cry, mourning our long-lost friends, our families, and the lives we once had. Taking him by the hand, I broach the unspoken subject between us. "Bernsey, I'm sorry I never fully loved you, like you loved me." His longing eyes are too much to bear, so I look down and make marks in the dirt with a stick. I just wish I felt those sorts of feelings. I wish I felt them for you. He leans over and kisses me gently on the cheek. I turn my head so our noses touch, and our eyes meet once more. My hands are on his muscular chest. He's not bodybuilder big, but lean, like a man who's spent years building machines with his hands, and with me. He takes me in his arms once more. An alien sensation, an urge comes over me. So I kiss him back on the lips, fuller, deeper. A light breeze rustles the eucalyptus leaves overhead, and their minty, woody scent rains down upon us. Starlight dances upon the unhurried ebbs and flows of the burbling creek. A distant pair of boobook owls call to each other with mournful hoots, as if for the last time. Afterwards, we hold each other, gazing up at the night sky through the gaps in the canopy. We lay like this for a long while, putting off the inevitable, until Bernsey passes me the spade again. I'm ready now, so I get up and start digging. "Aren't you going to help?" "I'm dead, remember? Always an excuse. The ground is dry and hard, so Grandpa Handley helps instead. After a long while, just before the outback dawn breaks, Bernsey's shallow grave is ready. "Climb in then," I say. But Bernsey doesn't reply. His lifeless body, short-haired, blood-stained, and missing one eye, is already laid to rest. Scooping up the tear-spotted red earth, I find enough peace to bury my best friend and say goodbye, just as I promised. Feast. It's 2 a.m. Cassie's mournful dirge drifts up from the pantry. I lie in bed, staring at the moonlight through the open window, exhausted from the absence of sleep, pondering whether tonight is the night I start to set boundaries, feign ignorance to my daughter's call for attention, or go downstairs to take care of her needs, as I have done every night since she died. The illuminated hands of the clock read 2:30 a.m. by the time she falls silent. For a moment, hope offers me its hand. Has the torment finally ended? Is peace now mine? A drumbeat pounds in my ears. Nerves fire off insurgent tension, and 2:45 a.m. is the time I begin to believe she has quietened for the night. I close my eyes, breathe in, breathe out. Unfamiliar calm trickles in. At the point sleep beckons, a sudden thunder crash of rage shakes my bed, and I hear Cassie howl like a banshee. Hope withdrawn, I throw off the duvet, slide my feet into cold slippers, and head downstairs on a silent prayer for Cassie to be gone by the time I open the pantry door. But she's there, on top of the refrigerator, like a mound of meringue, all folds and as white as freshly fallen snow. The silver heart charm that dangled from her wrist in life still in place. Her shadowy eyes are red and swollen. Her pudgy hands reach out to grasp the air. "About time," she wails, a repeat of what she says to me every night. I sigh, rub my sore eyes. "Sorry, sweetie. I was trying to sleep. It's almost 3 a.m. You do realize that?" A flash of times past when Cassie, a toddler, would creep into my room in the early hours to tell me she had been calling out for help in the bathroom, and would I come with her right now, because she really needed to go. Me chastising her as I chastise her now. I shrug. Then again, you're a spirit, so maybe you don't. A moan bubbles, bursts up from her insides. The pitch is ear-splitting. I am forced to cover my ears. "Do you realize how long I've been waiting?" she says. "Are you trying to starve me all over again?" She drags out the word starve. It stokes my guilt, and in my exhaustion, I want to laugh hysterically. I open the fridge door, bury the sarcastic smile playing on my lips amidst the piles of food on the shelves. Cream-filled pastries, trifles, cooked sausages, and bacon. Chocolate muffins topped with swirly icing domes. A foodie's paradise. But the sight makes me balk. Food dominated Cassie's 19-year lifespan. Mine, too. I cannot believe it dominates her in death. What would you like, Cassie? There's lots to choose from. How about, before I can finish, Her yelling bounces off the pantry walls. Anything. Just give me anything. I need to feed, and you're frittering away precious time asking me what I'd like. I take out the plate of sausages. In those first few weeks, she showed up. I took the time to place them in a bread roll, slather on ketchup and mustard to make it look appealing. I don't bother with the presentation now. Instead, I throw them into her open mouth as if I'm feeding a ravenous, feral dog. She doesn't chew. I'm not sure ghosts have the ability, but gulps them down in an instant. I see them slip through her transparent, organ-free form. It's like watching a medical scan in real time. They leave her as they went in, whole, unchewed, undigested, splatting to the floor. I follow with the cakes and trifles. Watch my spirit daughter gorge only to cry for more. I take the dustpan and brush, sweep up the mess, pour it back into her, and this is the cycle, pending her being satiated enough to cease her demands. Once the cycle stops and Cassie is soothed, I'll clean up, throw it all in the bin. It'll be far too mushy by then to save. Besides, it soon stinks the place out. Then I'll sit a while, talk to her about anything and nothing, until those shadowy eyes of hers close, and she falls silent for the rest of the night. I share some blame for Cassie's current state, and for how her life turned out. Weighing in at a hefty 13 pounds after a pregnancy sustained purely by chocolate bars, the only food my constantly nauseous stomach wouldn't eject. Cassie suckled the entire first night. Such was her voracious demands, until I was too sore for her to touch me. A bout of mastitis sealed the deal to move her onto bottle feeds. We'll see if she's meant to be this big, the health visitor said. You're only a small build, so maybe she'll slow down. Cassie did slow down, but I wasn't worried. Children grow at different paces. She possessed a healthy appetite, cleaning every morsel from her plate, and more. An active child, she remained slim, but followed her centiles, a term used by health professionals. Listening to the mothers at the school gates, fraught with their fussy eaters, I admit to feeling smug. Then, one day, karma bit me for my arrogance. Cassie stopped eating. Her personality changed. She was having trouble with her friends, bullying, her teachers said. A phase, I thought. But after 6 months, it dawned that this was no phase. Something far more serious was at play. Cassie is 10 years old and weighs what a child half her age should weigh. How long has she been experiencing problems with food? The doctor gazed at me with sympathetic eyes as he spoke. I was grateful for it. It made a change from the critical glances I had become used to. I took Cassie's hand, gave it a reassuring squeeze. She pulled away, a fierce scowl that said, "You are a lying bitch," came my way. She had gone through the surgery door under false pretense, that of holiday vaccines, to go somewhere exotic. I had said it with my face set in stone, so she didn't suspect. I risked paying a heavy price for inventing such a whopper. But by then, I'd have done and said anything if it meant getting Cassie help. Since summer, so 6 or 7 months maybe, I replied. She didn't like the way she looked in her swimsuit, said her thighs were too wobbly to be on show. I thought it would pass, only it hasn't. It's getting worse. I've been called to collect her from school several times because she's fainted. She gets breathless at the slightest exertion. Her bones jut out. She's pale and sleeps a lot. I'm really worried about her. I wanted to say I feared she'd die, but to say it could make it happen. So I kept it to myself. There's a risk of lifelong health problems if she doesn't start gaining weight. The doctor looked to Cassie. "Do you understand what is happening here, Cassie? You are very thin, and it's not good for you." Cassie stared at the floor, her arms crossed over her chest. The doctor sighed. "Let's see what help we can get for you, shall we?" We left the surgery. A prescription for supplementary feeds, iron pills, and vitamins stuffed in my pocket. A referral to child psychiatry on its way. Cassie sulked all the way home, shut herself away for several days without uttering a word to me. When she did finally show, her rage had stepped up a notch. "How dare you tell the doctor that I don't eat, Mum?" she yelled. "It is my business, not yours and not his." She stood in the middle of the kitchen, arms flailing, her tinny ribs visible beneath one of the close-fitting tops she insisted on wearing to display what she saw as a model figure. Cassie's glare cut me. I felt like the devil reincarnated. "You need help, sweetie. I've tried to do this on my own, but I'm lost now. I don't know what to do anymore. You're wasting away. I can't stand to see you like this." "Then don't look at me." Hands on hips, head thrust forward, a wild glint in her eyes. "Cassie, please don't. I only want to help, so shut up and leave me alone." She stomped off to her room. At the top of the stairs, she called out, "And just so you know, I will not see a doctor ever again." The door at the bottom of the stairs opened. As Cassie paced towards the kitchen, I was quick to hide the bottle labeled sugar-free lemonade I had refilled with a sugar-loaded version inside the refrigerator. Cassie was 15 at the time, skeletal, walking miles every day and night. She appeared in the kitchen door, layered up in clothing, a scarf and woolly hat, despite the heating being cranked so high I could barely breathe. "It's cold outside. They've forecast rain, too," I said. "Why don't we watch a film? I've bought some of that toffee popcorn and hazelnut chocolate you've always liked." Gray rings circled her eyes. Angry red spots shone from her cheeks. "Maybe later. she said, and turned to leave. Be back by 1. It's clinic today. Don't forget. The front door slammed behind her. Despite her lack of response, I knew Cassie would return home in time for her weekly appointment. She had signed an agreement with the medics, one I knew she would not default on. In exchange for doctors pausing her forced admission to hospital, she would eat a little more, show up at the clinic every Friday to be weighed, have her bloods checked. We drove to the clinic that afternoon, Cassie staring out of her side window, me humming along to the radio. The sun had broken through the clouds, turning a gray day beautiful. Inside the clinic, Cassie disappeared with the nurse, only to return several moments later. An ecstatic grin on the nurse's face. She's put on a whole kilogram since last week, the nurse announced. A glimmer of light shone. I began to see faith in that pivotal moment. Yet my faith would soon be shattered. The next morning, as laundry tossed in the washing machine, I heard a knock-knock coming from inside. I found nothing obvious when I emptied the machine, but when checking through the clothing, I felt small, hard lumps in the hems of Cassie's trousers, in the lining of the jacket she had worn the day previous, childlike stitching on the inner side. I picked it open. Pebbles fell on the floor. You should have put her in the psychiatric hospital when you had the chance. They'd have sorted her out. They're the professionals, not you. Having chided me throughout this challenging time, my mother's unwanted advice didn't come as a surprise. Cassie doesn't want to be in hospital, Mum. And I couldn't bear to think of her being force-fed, and that's what would happen. It would be purgatory for her. I'm sure she'd do something drastic, so she dies either way. Choking back tears, my feet barely touched the floor as I left the house, car keys in hand. I sped off down the road, not knowing where I was headed. I didn't return home for another 3 months. I woke from the induced coma 3 weeks after the car accident. Extensive surgical repairs to my left leg, from thigh to ankle, meant weeks of rehab and learning to walk again. By the time I returned home, Cassie had a slight prominence to her tummy, a rounder face, but she seemed downbeat, soulless. There, you see? My mother proudly paraded a plumper Cassie before me. This is what happens when you set boundaries for your children and don't allow them to control you. I took Cassie's hands. You look amazing, sweetie. So pretty. We hugged. I felt the meat on her bones, the warmth of her. She forced a smile, although darkness sat in her eyes. For the remainder of my mother's stay, I watched Cassie shovel her grandmother's meals into her mouth, mindless, not seeming to taste or enjoy what was going in. She tried to throw it all back up again when I first arrived, didn't you, dear? But I put a stop to that too, my mother announced. Cassie nodded. She didn't look up, said nothing, kept on like a robot, loading her fork, filling her mouth, swallowing. I should have been happy she was eating. I wasn't. When I asked, neither Cassie nor my mother would elaborate on what went on between them during my absence. Cassie would shrug, remain tight-lipped. My mother would smile and say, "Proper parenting, dear." Only at Cassie's wake, 4 years later, did my mother offer her pious explanation. I broke her. That's what happened. I removed everything she liked. Her music, the TV, those awful childish coloring books you insisted on buying for her. I locked her inside the house so she couldn't exercise. I put a spoon to her mouth every damn meal until she caved and started to eat. No food, no reward. When she fought against me, I slapped her every minute of every day for the entire 3 months, never out of my sight. That's all it took to get Cassie back again. It's what you should have done, but no, you had to give in to her again. Now look where she is. She turned to look at Cassie's photograph on the mantel. Then she was gone. You didn't like me when I was thin. You don't like me now I'm fat, do you? Cassie asks. I sit opposite Cassie's ghost on a chair I've dragged from the dining room. I haven't yet cleaned up the food mess from the floor. I stare into the myriad colors and textures. I've always loved you, Cassie. I worried about you when you were too thin. It didn't mean I disliked you. The saucepan flying through the air, the bolognese within it spraying across the kitchen cabinets, plates smashed against the floor tiles in my desperation to see her eat. Never have I revealed this to Cassie, but these were the times I disliked her the most. I used to think you were a useless mother. Misery and wrath cross Cassie's face like a hologram changes when it is turned. Do you still think that? I ask. You didn't understand me. You were afraid to. Cassie's eyes meet mine. I see the depth of her melancholy. An infinite, darkened pool. She is distant, forever out of reach, as she always was. Yet I failed to see it. Failed to see why. A lump comes to my throat. I cannot swallow it down. I grab the dustpan and brush to clear away the debris from the floor. Next comes the mop, swishing back and forth until the dirty patch shines. Throughout, Cassie is silent, watching me work. Eventually, she breaks the peace. Do you miss me? I lean on the mop handle. I miss you dreadfully, Cassie. I just wish our time together had been different, happier, less of a fight, squeezing out the water from the mop. I wonder why Cassie's ghost did not return with the appearance she bore when she died. Emaciated, barely there. Was her ghostly bulk meant to taunt me? As if she reads my mind, she says, "You were only happy when I ate, when I was bigger." So she comes here looking like this because she thinks it's how I prefer to see her. I drop my head to hide the brimming tears. It doesn't make me happy to see you like this, to see you so sad. Not back then, and certainly not now. The tremble in my bones reverberates in my voice. Cassie judders. Her mountainous bulk ripples. Her face crumples as the wailing kicks in. The mop drops from my hand, and I move to take her in my arms, stopping in my tracks when I realize I cannot touch her, cannot feel her. It's okay, sweetie. You don't have to do this. Believe me, I'd rather you rest. Her crying fades out like the end of a song. She becomes still. You don't wish to see me again? Her question is but a whisper. I would give anything to see you again. But not like this, and not if it causes you pain. For the first time since she started showing up here, I see her spirit smile. 5 a.m. The night after, and the dusky sky is littered with glistening dots. A chill seeps in through the open window. I shudder, get up to close the window, and with the click of its handle, my sleepy brain registers that I have not been stirred to the sound of Cassie's dirge. I listen for her cries. Nothing except silence fills the house. I should climb into bed, thankful for the peace. Instead, I creep downstairs, each step tentative, not wanting to rouse her or set off her wailing. The pantry door opens with a creak. I step inside. Cassie is gone, but for her heart charm bracelet lying on the top of the refrigerator. I pick up the bracelet, place it around my wrist, feel her presence against my skin. It tells me she will not return here, that her haunting is done. I take the stairs, crawl into my bed. Instantly, I fall asleep. Cassie's heart charm gripped between my fingertips, returning Marie. Now, before I say anything else, I just need to establish that I am not mad. I have every reason to be mad, but I'm not. I'm not mad. I've never been less mad than I am right now, even though I have every reason to be madder than I've ever been in my life. To the best of my recollection, you were not working here when I came in on Sunday. I'm sure I would remember somebody with as many piercings as you, especially with you being such a young lady and all. I'm sure I would have made some sort of comment about how you don't have a wedding ring on your finger. And that's probably due to all those cartoons you've chosen to imprint upon yourself. No. When I came in here on Sunday, there was a rather old man working behind the counter. I told him I was looking for a rug because my mother-in-law is coming to town, and whenever she comes over, she expects me to put out all the gifts she's gotten me over the years. 18 years of marriage, and she expects to see everything she's ever bought as though my home is some sort of Daphne Rubite museum. That's her name. Daphne Rubite. She tells me it's Latin, but who knows? The woman lies about everything. Why should her name be any different? Anyway, she got me a rug for Christmas last year, and it was so hideous that I kept it outside in the shed. But when I sent my husband, Griff, to go fetch it so we could display the awful thing. He said, "It appeared somebody had broken into the shed and stolen it. Do you believe that? Somebody actually wanted that disgusting rug so much they committed a crime in order to have it. Not that there's much in that shed worth anything, but even the bags of dirt would have been a better choice. My word, I came in here on Sunday because I was looking for a rug that appeared similar to the ugly rug that was stolen. But despite this, allegedly being an antique store, you do not sell rugs here. I believe I filed a formal complaint in that little suggestion box you have at the front, but I haven't heard any response yet. We can circle back to that later." When I expressed my disappointment to the old man working here at the counter, he offered to give me a discount on what he described as a rather interesting mirror. He went into the back of the store and came back with the item. I found it to be a bit too ornate for my taste. It was imitation gold, and the glass had several scratches on it. I told the old man that a discount would not suffice for a damaged object, but that I would accept it as a gift from the store, since I found it so unprofessional of him not to offer unattractive rugs. He took a moment, looked at the mirror, and then agreed to give it to me, gratis. The old man did not put up much of a fight, and I suppose I should have taken that as a sign that something was amiss. When I got the mirror home, I had absolutely no desire to ever look at it again. The only reason I took it was because I never turned down a deal, and there is no better deal than free. I decided to deposit it in my daughter's room. Riva is 15, and as such, she believes she has impeccable taste, when in fact, she has no taste whatsoever. She was quite stunned when I showed her the mirror. It's unusual for me to give her gifts, even on her birthday, when I usually donate money to a charity in her name. She took to the mirror immediately, and Griff did his best to hang it in her room, without putting holes in every wall. Finally, he managed to erect it by her closet, and then we all went about our day in preparation for the arrival of Queen Daphne. Almost immediately, things began to go wrong. I noticed that suddenly all the photographs around the house had been altered. I had no idea how it was happening, but the heads of everyone in the photos were gone. Simply gone. I thought it might be some sort of prank, but neither my husband nor my daughter are all that funny. When I mentioned the occurrence at dinner that night, Riva confessed to me that she believed her mirror was haunted. Not just haunted, mind you, but haunted by the ghost of Marie Antoinette. I would have chalked the whole thing up to a teenager's imagination, but my daughter is the least imaginative person you've ever met in your life. Deciding to investigate myself, I marched straight up to her room and planted myself in front of that mirror. Sure enough, after only a moment or two, there she was, Reine de France, herself. She had her head, but there was a minor scar around her neck, and she was holding the most adorable little dog. My French is spotty, since I haven't spoken it since college, when I spent a semester abroad in Paris, smoking cigarettes and ordering hamburgers at French cafes. I managed to work out that the mirror given to me was once owned by Marie's great-great-granddaughter, and she had taken up residence in it since she found heaven to be rather dull. She was the one who changed all the photos, and she said she planned on committing even more mischief for as long as she was in my house, unless I donated her to a museum where she belonged. Well, if that stuck-up monarch thought I was going to relinquish my own property simply to avoid a little poltergeisting, she was sadly mistaken. I told Marie that she was now a guest in my home and would act accordingly, or I would see to it that her mirror was placed in the shed where some petty thieves might abscond with it, the same way they had with the revolting rug my mother-in-law had purchased for me. I was so invested in intimidating a dead Frenchwoman that I didn't even hear the front door open. Daphne had entered our house without knocking, shocker, and came right upstairs to greet Riva, because her granddaughter is the only person she actually cares to see. She arrived just in time to hear me relay to Marie the story of the stolen rug, and she was none too pleased. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, holding the most vile candelabra I've ever laid my eyes on. "Well," she huffed, "would you care to throw this in the shed as well?" Truth be told, that's exactly what I wanted to do with it. Over the next few days, I couldn't tell you who irritated me more, my mother-in-law or the ghost of Marie Antoinette. While Daphne did her standard passive-aggressive commentary on everything from my fashion choices. A woman your age wearing skirts? How brave. To how I raise my child. Would one birthday gift a year really be that bad? Marie preferred to be a bit more whimsical in her torment. The house was constantly filled with smoke, for no reason at all. It wasn't until I located the source of the smoke that I realized our oven was on high, and there was a cake burning inside of it. It might be true that she never actually uttered the phrase about letting servants have their pastry, but that's no reason to waste perfectly good food. I have no idea how she even put the cakes together in the first place, since we normally order takeout and keep absolutely nothing in our pantries. Another tidbit Daphne likes to use against me when she visits. "No sugar," she'll squawk. What kind of a household has no sugar? A skinny household. That's what I feel like saying, but I never do. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought the two of them were conspiring against me in my own home. Daphne blamed Marie when all my skincare products were suddenly smeared all over the bathroom walls. But I can't believe anyone that rich would willfully waste La Mer. Marie was definitely responsible for what was going on with Riva. However, my daughter suddenly began acting out. She was shouting about bourgeoisie and escargot and something about a pot de chambre. It took me a day or so, but then I understood that Marie was trying to possess the girl in order to have an even more effective way of terrorizing everyone in the household. Griff was no help at all during all of this, by the way. He loves the History Channel, so for him, this was all wildly entertaining. It wasn't until Riva began taking 5 baths a day and demanding that I feed her bonbons that I decided enough was enough. My plan was to take the mirror out to the shed and smash it into 1,000 pieces. But I remember seeing an old horror film where destroying the haunted item caused the specter to permanently embed itself in the home. The last thing I needed was my daughter walking around like royalty until leaving for whatever community college we'd be sending her off to. I waited until earlier today, when Daphne and Riva were sitting on the couch with a cheese plate watching Les Miserables. And then I tore up to Riva's room and grabbed the mirror. I had to be careful coming down the stairs with it. But luckily for me, they were engrossed in the scene where the revolutionaries were being slaughtered. "Brilliant," I heard Marie exclaim in French. "I just love a good comedy." Somehow, all by myself, I managed to get this ghastly mirror into my car and drive it all the way back here. Now, I would like to return it. I would like an apology. I would like 3 free items from this store, all of which I will be choosing. I would also like an assurance that the old man who gave me the mirror is fired. What do you mean you don't have any old man working here? He was very distinct looking. He had bifocals, salt and pepper hair, and his left ear was a bit lower than his right. Surely you must know him, the owner, all right? Fine. So he's the owner. I still want him fired. What's that? When? 10 years ago? And how? A car accident? My. Well, that's what I get for not asking for a receipt. 28 sleighs. Later, above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thumped. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. "Don't worry, love. I've got this one." Rosemary frowned at him. "But everybody's here. Who could it be?" He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel. You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. "Carolers, or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off." A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door vibrate in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming, hold your horses. But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob? The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. What? He grunted. Let go of me. The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall, an animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. Get out! Get out! The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds. like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, a woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid, and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. Jesus, 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 he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again, and so did the windows looking into the lounge, and the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans." That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core, and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. "What?" He licked his lips. "What do we do?" Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. "Ho, ho, ho." It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. "I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with." Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. "Groovy," Santa bowed. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege. Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me. Santa raised one gloved finger. Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty. He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening? Santa narrowed his eyes. When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth. And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on. Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year. Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. The only thing we should be eating is turkey. The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in peace on earth. Stargazier. With rumblings of war rolling along the coastline, the knock startled Cecil. His grip tightened on the pewter plates as a sense of foreboding took hold. Opening the door revealed a handsome stranger with refined features as if carved from marble. He had jet black hair and eyes that glinted like cold steel. Good evening and happy Christmas, said the stranger in a rich baritone. My apologies for the intrusion, but it seems my carriage has lost a wheel just up the road. Might I trouble you for some shelter from the cold while my man fetches assistance? Cecil hesitated. He had been expecting his brother-in-law. He was struck dumb. Before he could collect his wits, his wife appeared behind him. "Marry a sec?" she asked. Seeing the stranger standing in the door, she apologized. "Sorry, I thought you were me brother. His carriage threw a wheel," Cecil said. "Of course. Please come in," Sharon said, nudging her husband aside and opening the door wider. The stranger rubbed down his arms as if to shift rain from his finely tailored long coat. Though wary, Cecil relented under his wife's insistence. As the stranger stepped inside, removing his leather gloves, Cecil couldn't shake the feeling of darkness lurking beneath the polished, genteel surface. He led the man toward the sitting room as Sharon fetched some tea, hoping his instinct was wrong. The man shrugged off his jacket, folded it neatly, and put his Homburg on top. "I'm Cecil, by the way," he added politely. "And you are?" "Moloch. Abraham Moloch," said the stranger with a thin smile as he took a seat by the fire. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance." "What brings you to this part of the coast?" Cecil asked. Sharon returned with a tea tray, casting a reproachful look at Cecil for not taking the stranger's bag or hanging his hat. "Please make yourself comfortable, Mr. Moloch," she said warmly, handing him a cup. Just then, their 2 children peeked into the room, eyes widening at the unfamiliar guest. They had heard rumors of German soldiers landing along the coast and were wary. "The tall one is Felix. The runt is Jasper," Sharon said. She busied herself pouring tea, checking his sack coat. Mr. Moloch's face soured. "I seem to be out of cinder toffees. Bad luck? Perhaps next time." He then opened his bag and pulled out a few colorful Christmas crackers. The children's caution vanished at the sight. "For your little ones," Mr. Moloch said, with a genteel nod, handing the crackers to Sharon. She gave them to the delighted children. The stranger made a show of patting his pockets. "My apologies. I seem to have left my coin purse on my carriage." He turned to Cecil. "Please, take this as a token for your hospitality," he said, offering a large golden ring set with a glittering red gemstone. Cecil politely declined. "That won't be necessary, really. We're happy to help," Mr. Moloch insisted, but Cecil refused once more. Finally, Mr. Moloch returned the ring to his pocket, a flicker of irritation passing over his features before the charming smile reappeared. In her lilting accent, Sharon offered to share their dinner. "There's plenty of stargazy pie and stewed greens to go around. 'Tis no trouble," Mr. Moloch accepted graciously. "You are too kind. I apologize for the inconvenience. I'm on my way to London to view a portrait. Please let me contribute. It's not a bother." Moloch's voice rumbled like distant artillery. Cecil imagined the windows rattling. "Oh, nonsense. Travelers are welcome. It wouldn't be Christian of us to turf you out," Sharon said, then turned sharply to the children. "And don't you dare be popping them crackers till supper," she instructed Cecil to fetch an extra place setting and yelled to the kitchen for one of the children to bring the stool, so Mr. Moloch had a place to sit. Leaving to finish the cooking preparations, she tossed a meaningful glance at her husband. With Sharon gone, Mr. Moloch again offered Cecil the ring. "Please, I must insist. Consider it thanks for your hospitality." This time, with no one else present, Cecil accepted it, sliding the ring onto his finger. The red gem glinted in the firelight. Mr. Moloch smiled, leaning back with a smirk. Cecil studied the ring on his hand. It looked expensive. How would he explain this extravagant gift to Sharon? She had refused it just minutes ago. Perhaps he could trade it in the village without her ever knowing. He quickly took it off and put it in his pocket. The family sat down to dinner, with the older boy pushing the stool into Jasper's spot. The smell of fresh bread and fish followed Sharon. Jasper's knees poked up too high, so he stretched his legs out to the sides. "Don't be rockin', Jasp. We've got company." Sharon put her hand on Japer's leg to hold him still. Jasper moved the wiggles up to his shoulders in defiance. "We've got plenty of food. I'm afraid we've mashed together our holidays on account of me brother comin' home from the war. He should be along any time now." Cecil whistled. "Don't mind my wife. She's Cornish and a wee bit potty." Sharon playfully smacked Cecil's shoulder. "You familiar with the story of Tom Bawcock? It's Mariusec's favorite holiday, so we didn't want him to miss out. Would you like me to recount the tale?" Cecil feigned disinterest, having heard it many times before. "It's just a fish tale. I'd love to hear it." Mr. Moloch's eyes opened wide. "Dinner and a show? You are too kind," clearing her throat. Sharon launched into song. "A merry place, you may believe, was Mousehole upon Tom Bawcock's eve. To be there, then, who wouldn't wish to sup o' 7 sorts o' fish?" Cecil interjected. "Could you at least sing in plain English, dear?" "I was," Sharon replied indignantly, then laughed at her flustered husband. The children joined in teasing Cecil as she continued. "When Murgy Broth had cleared the path, comed lances for a fry. And then us had a bit o' ska, and starry gazy pie." Mr. Moloch applauded enthusiastically, rising to his feet. "Marvelous. You have a true gift, my dear. Thank you for sharing such a delightful folk tale." Sharon beamed, giving a slight curtsy before urging everyone to tuck into the feast before them. The children reached for the Christmas crackers. Mr. Moloch raised a hand. "Please, allow me to share a tradition from my home. Are you familiar with Snapdragon?" Cecil perked up, recalling playing it as a boy, burning his mouth in the process. He nodded with a grin. From his bag, Mr. Moloch produced a tin of dried fruits and almonds and a bottle of brandy. Using the lid of the tin as a dish, he tapped out a few pieces of fruit and doused them with the brandy. He lit the fruit with a match. They ignited in blue fire. Plucking a piece of dried apple up, he popped it into his mouth, then blew out a small blue flame. The children watched, enthralled. When Felix reached out, Mr. Moloch pulled the tin away. "There is a rule to this game, a way to show what you are most thankful for." He turned to Cecil meaningfully. "In this dance, with fear and shadow, reveal the ember burning deepest within. Speak not of fleeting joy, but lay bare the pulsating rhythm that makes you feel alive. For in the flicker of this flame, you offer the essence binding you to existence, the marrow of your being. Choose wisely, for what you express in this dance may echo beyond the crackling fire. Cecil tensed, unsettled by the speech. He started to object, but Sharon and the children insisted on playing. Reluctantly, Cecil nodded, hoping it was merely an odd tradition and nothing more. Jasper went first, popping a flaming fig into his mouth and blowing out a wisp of blue flame. "My fossil collection," he declared proudly. Felix blew a slightly larger plume. "My brother, Jasper!" Jasper took a moment to decide if that was an insult, and chose to accept it as so, with a broad, crooked smile. Sharon selected a piece of dried plum, popped it in her mouth, and blew a modest burst of blue. "My singing voice, of course." She put her hand to her mouth. "Blooming hot." Cecil blew a flame and said, "Maintaining our thankful village, with all returned so far from the war." Mr. Moloch inhaled deeply, then exhaled an enormous, writhing blue jet. "Nothing," he uttered in his deep bass. They pulled their Christmas crackers. With a festive popping, a scattering of paper crowns and trinkets spread across the table. But then, Cecil noticed Jasper was gone. On the empty place where Jasper had sat was a letter stating Mariasek had died in the trenches in Le Cateau. Somberly, they had set the extra place for the missing brother, the first casualty of war come to their village. Cecil looked around, confused. Hadn't someone been sitting across from him just a moment ago? He felt bad for his wife. She'd been so upset. It was nice, however, to have a house guest. He also wondered why Felix was using the kitchen stool and not the chair set for his brother-in-law's spirit. But glancing at Mr. Moloch's smiling face, the questions slipped from Cecil's mind. Sharon offered to sing Tom Bawcock's tale in her gravelly voice. Mr. Moloch was eager to hear it. She began, "A merry plaise you may believe was mousel upon Tom Bawcock's eve." Cecil quickly stopped her, feeling something was amiss. Her voice wasn't her best trait. "It's a Cornish tradition about a fisherman during a time of famine who bravely set out in a storm to feed the town where Sharon came up." Mr. Moloch proposed a round of snapdragon, calling it a beloved pagan tradition where you express gratitude. Wary but enticed, Cecil agreed to play, as did an enthusiastic Felix and Sharon. Mr. Moloch turned to Cecil. "As the flames dance, whisper the heartbeat of your existence. Share not what you cherish, but the core defining your breath. What in your soul would you sacrifice to the hungry fire?" Felix blew a blue jet. "My boxing gloves." Sharon smiled proudly at her son's first true passion. She blew her flame. "My son Felix." Felix beamed. Cecil contemplated a moment, before blowing his fiery breath. The proud, strong Royal Navy keeping invaders at bay. As the crackers popped, Sharon let out a wail. Felix was gone. Sobbing, she explained her boy was killed in the German shelling of the coast. He was so fond of Unton fossils after Boxen in Whitby. My apologies for her. It's been a trying time, Cecil said. She'd lost her voice from ceaseless weeping over the past fortnight. Mr. Moloch looked pained. My sincerest regrets at your loss. They sat in silence for a few moments, so Sharon could collect herself. Perhaps a round of snapdragon to lift spirits? Mr. Moloch suggested. My family tradition is to share what we are most thankful for. He turned to Cecil. You know the rules. Speak the fire within, the pulse of your sacrifice. What do you cherish most? Sharon blew a wisp of blue. My lovely home, Cecil contemplated before breathing his flame. My beautiful wife, Mr. Moloch rumbled. Nothing, his jet dwarfing theirs. The crackers popped like artillery fire as Cecil transitioned to sitting with Mr. Moloch in a seaside shack. Cecil drank heavily from the offered brandy, lamenting his wife, his children, his home, his brother. He stared at the letter, telling of his brother-in-law's death. Cecil's memories slipped away like vapor. He regretted not living the life he wanted, blaming the demon drink that stole his wife, kids, and chance to take his place in battle. Mr. Moloch offered dried fruit and a game of snapdragon to lift his spirits. Sacrifice the spark, keeping your flame alive, fueling your dance in shadows, he instructed. Cecil blew a wisp of blue. My health? Mr. Moloch rumbled. Nothing. Then he offered a Christmas cracker. The pop left a hint of black powder in the air. In a bedroom, Mr. Moloch sat beside Cecil. They played again, Cecil sacrificing his only prized possession, the ring sitting heavy in his pocket. Mr. Moloch blew out a large flame and crunched into his almond, then said, Nothing. Cecil stood to pull the cracker. Mr. Moloch assisted Cecil's palsied hand. A pop and a wisp of smoke. Cecil reached for the flaming fruit, blew out a flame. My home. They pulled the cracker together. Mr. Moloch offered his coat to Cecil, a destitute man on the roadside. He pulled a table and chairs from the back of his broken coach, then invited Cecil to share some stargazy pie while his carriage was repaired. Cecil recognized the pie and table. Memories of his wife and children flooded back. He despaired at their loss. The rancid pie at the end of Cecil's ordeal seemed a mockery, stale remnants of a life freely sacrificed to an insatiable demon. Despite this, the food was more than welcome. Each bite revealed years of life, each crumb a precious scene. He ate at his memories as a starved man. Please return all as it was. I refuse to play Snapdragon any longer, he pleaded. Mr. Moloch just smiled. One final cracker, He shook the cracker enticingly. Cecil cried, "My life. I'd trade my life for theirs." "Finally," Mr. Moloch uttered, holding out the cracker. This time, Cecil got the bigger half. "Dreadful luck, Cecil." He set the paper crown atop Cecil's head. Strands of Cecil's hair drifted onto Mr. Moloch's sleeve. Cecil sat numbly as Mr. Moloch brushed off the fallen hair, gingerly placing one in his front vest pocket. "You traded your life, family, and youth for a ring. Then, even the ring you returned. When will humans learn to give selflessly?" "But what of my children's souls?" Cecil asked, his voice frail, but insistent. "Their bodies, I can find a use. Their souls are their own," replied Moloch, tapping his finger to his lips. "You know, I never ask for children, yet I'm often offered them. Perhaps you know why humans so eagerly trade their future." Cecil had a coughing fit. "I am not heartless, spiritually," added Moloch. "I can offer you one last challenge, a gift if you answer a riddle. But you would not know the gift beforehand." Having nothing left, Cecil accepted the challenge. This one was from a Canaanite whom I knew several lifetimes ago. In every heartbeat and every sigh, I'm the reason you laugh and the tears you cry. From the first cry of newborn breath to the quiet stillness at death's edge. What am I? Moloch adjusted his hat and waved to his coach. "I am expected in London to collect a portrait of a young man. It seems its owner has withered away in a locked room. The damn fool." He smiled. "Souls aren't typically my business, but that fellow..." Please let me think in silence," Moloch shrugged. "Life," Cecil said, sure of his answer. "Please give me my family, my wife, Jasper. I beg you, I want peace. Please, I have given up everything." "Correct," Moloch said. He handed Cecil a draft. "If you drink it, none of this would matter." He waved his hands theatrically. Far out at sea, a ship was on fire. The scent of gunpowder and death rolled over the seaside like a fog. Cecil was caught by hope's web. He imagined he'd wake with his family by his side. So he drank without hesitation. The blue liquid smelled of blueberries and spirits. The flavor was a simple, mildly floral sweetness, but empty, like drinking a hole. He was alone, holding an empty bottle. He began a long, quiet walk down a dark road. A carriage passed within a beautiful voice rang out. "A merry plays you may believe was mousel upon Tom Bawcock's eve. To be there, then wooden wesh, to sup o sibm sorts o fesh. When Morgie broth had cleared the path, comed lances for a fry, and then us had a bet o and starry gazi pie. Nex cummed for mods, brathusti jods, as mod are oozles, dry, and ling and hock, enough to make a raunen shark. to sigh. A ache wed clunk as elth were drunk, and bumpers bremmen why. And when up come Tom Bawcock's, nam we praised unto the sky. Two boys waved from the carriage window at the old man wearing a paper crown. Cecil smiled at them as they passed. On 25th December, an unofficial truce was declared along the Western Front. Peace for a day. Perhaps Moloch was not entirely heartless. Cecil did ask for peace, a decently modest proposal. Hey you, yes you, reading this story. Don't worry, this isn't some piece of meta-fiction. I'm dictating what I say to a gracious volunteer who will post it for me. I've got an offer for you. And no, not like a door-to-door salesman peddling dull kitchen knives or what have you. You see, my offer is as genuine as a baby's first laugh. My name is Donald Basemore Cooper. Quite a mouthful, I know. My friends call me Donnie, DB, Coop, Basement, and so on. Take your pick. They're like paint samples. But the people I do business with, oh, they call me a lifesaver. Believe it or not, old Donnie here knows a thing or two about you. I'd wager 9 out of 10 of the people reading this are sitting down. Maybe you're lucky, number 10 though, standing up at work, browsing your phone, blessed enough to have clicked this offer. Maybe your job doesn't let you sit down like a cashier or that guy who takes the stubs off movie tickets. Regardless, whether you're sitting or standing, you'll realize that your feet probably hurt. Maybe a little, maybe a lot. Maybe sitting down is just a temporary oasis from the desert of swollen soles and pained pinky toes. But we've all been there. We all know what it's like to have our dogs barking. Think about it. From the moment you were born, your mommy or your daddy had a countdown going for the day you'd take your first steps. Maybe they even filmed it, a joyous occasion to look back on. But was it really? Because after that, you might have found walking fun for a year or two. Then you might have graduated to running, sweating off the sugar highs you'd get from your candies and such. But at some point, I'm confident walking and running just became, vanilla, plain and simple, boring even. Hell, I'm taking it one proverbial step further and guessing it's just plain tiring too. Now, as an adult, say you can't find a parking space close to where you need to go. Now you gotta walk. Or maybe the bus station isn't that close to where you work. We haven't exactly designed cities around those of us without cars. Maybe your job keeps you on your toes. Go run this, go clean this, go serve that table of assholes their food, knowing they won't tip you. More walking, and even if you try and relax on a weekend, guess what? How long can you last? until you go shopping at a store, or even a mega shopping center, floor after floor, dedicated to glorious capitalism, a shrine to enjoyment and consumerism. But your feet will have hell to pay. And I know I can hear some of you thinking to yourselves, but Donnie, I like to walk, run, and jog. Hell, I eat marathons for breakfast. I hear you. I promise you still gotta listen to my offer. You see, why do we do those things? If you ask me, it boils down to 3 different reasons. First reason, maybe you like an early morning stroll through the woods because you gotta de-stress. It's calming, serene, reminds you of your mama's womb. I get that. But it can't be the only way you know how to de-stress. I'm sure your buddies, the bed and the couch, would like to chime in and remind you how relaxing they are. And if you still want to be in nature, watch a bird or 2. Park benches are right there, singing a siren song to rest your feet. Second reason, weight loss. You want to be sexy. You want to look thin. You gotta shave those pounds off of you. But I'm sorry to say, it's really all a sham. Society made up these rules as to who counts as hot, who gets to be on the big screens and such. They want you to look thin because there's more money for them in looking thin. Exercise machines, designer clothes, beauty products, all that costs way more than a bag of chips and cookie dough, if you know what I'm saying. And then they have the gall to make food so tasty, yet so fattening, to keep this endless cycle going. You pay money to get thin, only to pay money to get fattened again. That's the secret to beauty. It's just money wearing a mask. Don't fall for it. Live how you want. Don't worry about running to get thin. Reason the third. Maybe you run for sport. You know, it happens. You could have had a lazy eye and couldn't hit or throw a ball right. But boy howdy, you sure could run like hell in a straight line. Now, your pal Coop here wasn't much of an athlete. Most of my running came from evading the school bullies, who are now, hopefully, adult has-beens and burnouts. But that spirit of competition is a wonderful thing. It's food for the heart and soul. But it won't last. Sooner or later, your body gives out, and you'll just be yearning for the glory days, like a college alum still visiting their frat house on homecoming. You can't run forever, so you see where I'm coming from now? Almost everyone reading this declaration of mine is going to tragically fall victim to one day being so pained, so hurt, so egregiously tired, all from walking. Biologically speaking, we aren't even designed to be standing up straight for so long. Our spines are an affront to God, if anything. So, what do we do? What is Mr. Basemore Cooper here leading up to? What is my offer to you, My dear reader, well, let me tell you a story. Growing up, my grandfather, or my Boompa as I called him, lived on his own. He'd come visit me, walking up the 3 stone steps to my house, back and knee pains the whole time. Of course, I didn't know at the time how much he hurt. He was just Boompa to me, so friendly, so kind, bringing over an apple or 2 to help keep the doctor away for me, you know? As a kid, I'd run around the house or the yard, trying to play with Boompa, never realizing how he struggled to catch up. Then, inside, I'd jump on his lap as he sought relief on our couch. He's the one who taught me my dogs are barking instead of saying my feet hurt. Hell, he'd put a spin on it with the whole pound is a barking Donnie, and then he'd leave to go home to his apartment, up several flights of stairs, all by himself. And I'd beg him to stay. Please, Boompa, I want to play every day. And I'd wonder why my parents were just letting him go off by himself. In retrospect, it's even worse. They had to have known his legs were hurting, but they basically kicked him out into the cold every time he finished visiting. Why couldn't Boompa just live with us? Would it really have been that hard? Don't you get ahead of yourselves, dear readers. There isn't some skeleton in Boompa's closet. No sins of the grandfather. No wicked reason why baby Donald couldn't see him every day. The real reason? Independence. As long as he could walk, he insisted on taking care of himself, living on his own, and thus seeing me only a dozen times a year. Tragic, right? Your hearts must be breaking. Boo-hoo for Donnie. Nah, I should get that I was still lucky to even have Boompa. But you know who wasn't lucky? Boompa. Knees sore, feet aching. A lifetime of walking amounting to chronic pain. It really shouldn't be a surprise that he couldn't cross the street at a normal speed. So if you think about the number of stupid people combined with the number of impatient people in this country, it was really only a matter of time. Boompa couldn't possibly react fast enough to that car. Don't grab your tissues and start weeping. He lived. It's actually funny how tires crushing your bones, grinding your flesh, and spilling your blood across the pavement isn't enough to kill you sometimes. I wonder if Boompa found it funny too, lying there, waiting for the ambulance, dragging himself away from the mangled remains of his legs. Just a clean cut, the kind that would make a butcher blush with how precise it was. Just like that. No more legs and feet to hurt. Just like that. Boompa was at home. My home. To live with us. I could talk to him all day. My parents would take care of him, and he'd never have to walk again in his wheelchair. I couldn't be happier that he lived out the last few years of his life with us, fully provided for and loved. I'm sure he'd agree. I'll have to ask him when I go to heaven. And we could have had all that for longer if he had just gotten rid of his legs sooner. Don't you think? What I'm proposing is a free service, all done by me on the house, to give yourself the same kind of life Boompa had at the end. Fully taken care of, free from the stress of walking. You'll find new ways to relax, new games to play to pass the time. And losing weight? Well, a leg is a little under a fifth of your weight. So losing both? You're talking upwards of 50 pounds off, all at once. Way more efficient that exercise ever could be. Come on. Working out is hell. All the sweat and the pains and finding time to do it. I'm telling you, my offer is way better than that. You might be hesitant because you don't have a spare wheelchair lying around. No worries. Part of the service is that I'll help you procure one suited just to your needs. What about housing? Making sure you can still move around. Your boy Donnie is right here. We can rearrange your house to be a more wheelchair-friendly space. What's that? Your job? Going out in public? Right now, I'm working on pushing the government to pass legislature to increase disability pay. Most public places have to be wheelchair accessible already. But with an increase to monthly payments, you'll have more than enough free money to use on both living and entertainment. You'll see, it really won't be a big deal to use ride-sharing services once you have the money from selling your car. How is the procedure done? Well, there are too many hoops to jump through to doing this in a hospital. God forbid us red-blooded Americans exercising the freedom we've been promised. I'll gladly come to your house instead. Just give me your address, and we'll pick a time that works best for you. Maybe you want the kids out of the house. Maybe you've been looking for an excuse to get off of work on a Monday. Certainly won't be going back to that job after we're done. I've got my bag of tools with me here. We've got some chloroform here, a new set of rags, some ropes too. I find it decreases the squirming if you happen to wake up. You don't have to worry about carpet stains either. I'll throw down a tarp. We could even set you up in bed for maximum comfort as well. Then you've got your choice of tool. The chainsaw is a wonderful choice for those horror fanatics out there. Plus, the noise will drown out any screaming that might occur. Again, if you wake up. But maybe you want quick and painless, or at least as painless as possible. That's where the elegant Japanese katana comes in, fully capable of slicing through bone. Maybe you want to savor the moment you give into a lifetime of relaxation and sitting. Or maybe you find your jollies from a little bit of pain here and there. No judgment here. But I've still got my trusty hacksaw here, still good to go from the first time I did this procedure. Now, the forums will tell you that a bone saw might cut better, but ignore that hogwash. With enough elbow grease and a can-do attitude, my hacksaw and I will easily get your legs on a one-way trip to Aruba, never to bother you again. Don't you worry a hair on your pretty head. I know what I'm doing here. It's not my first rodeo. I've had plenty of satisfied customers in the past. It does take a little convincing, but if you met me in person, my pearly white smile would knock your socks off. Be warned, ladies, I'm quite the charmer. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up chit-chatting mid-procedure too. Why, yes, I'd love to take you out to dinner in your fine new wheelchair this Friday. I'll hold the door open for you and make sure you get home safe before I lift you and tuck you into bed, nice and snug. Now, in full honesty, not everyone is fully on board with this procedure yet, but I really am doing people a huge favor here. The couple of times they hesitated to say yes didn't stop me from grabbing the old chloroform here. I remember this one gentleman, surely an upstanding and strong man, didn't hesitate to start crying and begging me to stop once he was tied down. Those tears reminded me a lot of myself when I used to cry when Boompa left. Oh, how things got better for me. And soon they'd get better for him too. In fact, this young gentleman typing this all out is my latest customer. You see, I'm not the best with computers, so we cut a deal. He could keep one of his legs if he helped me spread my word far and wide. So here we are. If only you could see him hobble, a little tear in his eye. There won't be any tears once he moves into his wheelchair, with my help, of course. I'm not a monster, after all. So folks, if you're interested in changing your life for the better, taking a stand against pain by sitting down permanently, then I'm your man. For Donald Basemore Cooper, call 555-NO-LEGS for me. You want to be free? Call your pal DB and make sure you hold on to those legs once they're off you, because I've got a great home recipe to share with you in the kitchen. The Pen Ultimate. It was a bit of a shock to see Sophie again at the door on a Thursday evening during the pre-news sitcoms, because by all accounts, she was quite dead. Peter Lander distinctly recalled kissing her passionately, bittersweetly even, because it was their last kiss, and he knew it even if she didn't, right before he blew her brains out with his Colt python. He knew he was right, because Eileen made a big fuss. Why the hell did you kiss her? She's my wife. Not anymore. True. And given the insides of her skull, confettied all over the living room. And that later that week, they put the rest of the package 6 feet under. And then a day after that, they collected on the staggering life insurance. Yes, Sophie was dead. She had to be. And yet, hello, Peter. said Sophie, standing at their door. Said Peter. Dirt dribbled from her dress and hair, and actually, she was covered in dirt. No makeup, but her hair was done up, and frankly, she looked like she might just have gotten back from a rainy rugby match, which she for some reason played in her funeral dress. And maybe she was a little paler than usual. Oh, and she had that gaping hole in her forehead, of course. Sophie rolled her eyes, pushed past him, and muttered something about, "Why don't I let myself in?" Peter followed her to the kitchen, where Eileen was making herself a vodka cranberry. "Oh my God," said Eileen. Her tone was shocked, but not the kind of shocked you get when you see a dead person walking around, but rather when you see the wrong dead person walking around, like when you're in line at the express checkout, but the old guy in front has more than 10 items, and it's noisy, and the AC doesn't work, and a greasy tween elbows you in the boob and doesn't even notice, much less apologize. "Peter, what the hell? She just showed up," he said with a shrug. "What do you want from me?" "Right," said Sophie. She placed a briefcase on the kitchen table, her lawyering briefcase from back when she was alive, and a lawyering, and unclasped it. "Gather round. Family meeting time." Peter and Eileen sat, though she huffed and crossed her arms and kept the vodka at hand. "Are you even part of our family anymore?" Eileen asked. Sophie glared her silent. Then she pulled out piles of papers, old yellow paper, covered in horrid red ink, all over the table. "Soph," Peter said. And then he winced. He never really knew how to broach deeper topics with her, which was maybe why their marriage was so-so. What's happened to you? Are you a ghost?" "She's obviously a zombie," Eileen snapped. "I told you to use the shotgun, but did you listen?" "No." Sophie drew herself up and sniffed. "I am not a ghost, Peter. Ghosts aren't real." Out of her briefcase, she pulled out, reverently, a ruby-red fountain pen. Except it wasn't merely ruby red, it was ruby, with a gold nib, and placed it gently beside her. "Neither am I anything so gauche as a zombie," Eileen pouted. "I am a revenant." Peter and Eileen shared a look. "What's a revenant?" he asked. "I'll put it this way. When I ran into the devil in hell—" "Told you lawyers went to hell," Eileen said, sneering. Sophie cleared her throat. "When I ran into the devil, I made a deal with him. He'd let me come back as an undead murder machine so that I could wreak unholy vengeance on those who wronged me. You know, tear you limb from limb, eat your heart, and drag your sorry soul back down with me. Kind of one last big hurrah in the world of the living." Peter gulped. Eileen dropped her glass, which wobbled on the table and spilled all over her lap. "Thing is," Sophie continued, holding up a parchment covered in bloody writing. "I've gone over this contract hundreds of times, and as soon as I kill you, I go back too." But not until she took a couple fresher-looking sheets of yellow paper and slid them across the table, one each for Peter and Eileen. "So, I'm willing to offer you a deal. Feel free to read over that. But the gist is, I don't murder you. And in exchange, I get to live here and get access to the millions from my life insurance policy." Peter looked at his paper and gulped. "Is this written in blood?" "It's Lucifer ink, by Lucifer Inc., Sophie said. Then, with a distant look in her eyes and an unsubtle tremble, she added, "Blood tends to boil down there. Oh, it is written on human leather, though." Peter and Eileen dropped their papers. "What if we don't sign?" Eileen asked. "Then I murder you now and drag your soul down to hell. Can we just shoot you again?" Peter asked. "Technically, yes. But come on, Peter. Use your thinking brain. I'm already dead. Even if you managed to destroy my body by blowing it up or something, I'd just come right back, like some cheesy slasher flick. And the neighbors would probably complain about the noise." Oh, Peter and Eileen held quiet counsel for just a moment, wiggling their eyebrows and making meaningful expressions at each other. Of course, since Sophie knew them both intimately, one as a husband and the other also as a mistress, their secret language was no secret to her. She lay her ruby pen before them. "What kind of pen is that?" asked Eileen. "A pen par excellence. The pen ultimate. The devil's very own quill. Utterly binding on a soul level. I might have swiped it from his desk." "What? Don't look at me like that. It's not like I can possibly get into even more trouble." What choice did they have? They signed. Then, for a second, they shimmered in a red glow and experienced a pang of bowel distress. And it was done. And Sophie moved back into the house she paid for. Her old firm wouldn't take her back when she called. "No offense, Soph. And I mean that. You were one of the best, for sure. It's just people already see us as ghoulish, and if we brought you back, well, it'd no longer be libel, would it?" So she plopped herself down on the living room couch, right in the middle, so Peter and Eileen couldn't cuddle up on it while watching a nice rom-com or something. Not that they watched rom-coms, because Sophie had control of the remote, and she binged trashy reality TV 24 hours a day. "Maybe someone else would want to watch something," Eileen said. "Maybe someone else should get a job and buy the TV," Sophie snapped. And 24 hours a day really was 24 hours a day, since Sophie didn't sleep. "You mind turning that down at night?" Peter asked, after he caught himself humming a reality theme song in the shower. "It's just, I can't sleep." "Yes, Peter," said Sophie. "I do mind." And then she cranked the volume up. The only thing that competed with the blaring TV was the shrill ding of the doorbell, going off like clockwork. Also, at all hours of the day. Having some free time, for perhaps the first time in her life, Sophie crawled the online shopping sites and splurged on whatever caught her eye. After all, her life insurance money was as much hers as anyone else's. And given this was her retirement, she had nothing to save for. The lack of responsibility felt liberating. The living room was soon filled with unread books, unworn clothes, unwatched movies, unexercised workout machines, and uneaten chocolate. Somewhere, she even found a life-size alabaster unicorn, whose horn scratched up the low ceiling. And because she refused to budge from the couch, muttering something about the sentimental value of it being the place her brain was ejected, it fell to Peter and Eileen to get the deliveries. It was exhausting in their spare moments. Peter and Eileen mostly stuck to the kitchen, where the blaring TV was at least a little muted. Having company over was difficult, because all their friends understandably kept bringing up the Sophie situation. And frankly, it was getting embarrassing explaining themselves over and over, and stressing that the living room was Sophie's room, and so it was best to leave it be. Eileen hit the bottle increasingly hard, and Peter took up smoking again. Easy, since Sophie no longer nagged him about it. "This isn't working for me," Eileen said one night. Peter nodded. "This isn't how I pictured our early retirement." Peter nodded again. "Are you listening to me?" "Christ, yes. What do you want from me?" "I want the life of luxury I was promised. I want to be able to host our friends with swanky parties." She pouted. "I want my yacht." Peter rolled his eyes. "Don't you dare," he sighed and massaged the bridge of his nose. "It's not ideal, is it? What can we do? I thought we were rid of her. Be nice." "No," said Eileen. "I'm sick of this. I wish we never signed that stupid contract." "Well, she would have murdered us. And, you know, the whole hell thing. Whatever." Then Eileen's eyes lit up. "Hey, maybe there's a loophole. Where's the contract?" Stealing Sophie's briefcase wasn't too hard, what with the TV blaring, and her attention focused entirely on the very real antics of the very real people on display. They brought it back to the kitchen for some privacy and started going through the papers. Sophie's contract with the devil was huge. It took them a solid week to go through it. A week made all the harder by the constant interruptions from deliveries. But finally, on Friday, they hit on something. Footnote 28397, Peter read. "Note that the Revenant has license to seek revenge on exactly one former aggressor. As soon as such an aggressor is slain, the Revenant contract is concluded, and both souls become the property of Lucifer Inc. Note that collateral damage is permitted." "What's that mean?" Eileen asked. "I'm reading. Hold on. Basically, if she blows us up or something, that's fine too. The contract's done when one of us dies, but there's no penalty, I guess, if we're both dead." "Super. So very encouraging." "Shh. Wait. There's more." Peter adjusted his glasses and took a drag on his cigarette. Note also that the contract will be concluded if any of the aggressors should die by any means, whether caused by the revenant or not. This includes, but is not limited to, traffic accidents, war, acts of God, peanut butter, old age, or being murdered by someone else. Said Eileen, setting her drink down. Said Peter. What do you suppose that means? I guess, Eileen hedged, if one of us were to die, then... Peter set his cigarette down on the table. He locked eyes with Eileen, and neither blinked, as an ad for an energy drink roared in the background. At once, she flew at the counter, and he dived for the pantry. And they both kicked over their kitchen table. Eileen grabbed the first things available to her, a cutting board covered in raw, soon-to-be schnitzels, and a gory meat tenderizer. She flung the floppy meat patties across the room and roared, hoisting her tenderizer into the air. And then, with a shriek, brought her cutting board up, just in time to block the worst of a volley of canned pinto beans. Peter charged her with a battle cry, holding a jumbo can of tomato juice with both hands. He leapt at her, right as she swung. Her tenderizer savaged his temple, but he tackled her. I think we should see other people, he roared, bringing his can of tomato juice down and down again. Eileen screamed, desperately blocking with her cutting board and flailing her face tenderizer, until it finally connected with his jaw. It was enough for her to push him off and then roll on top. And now Peter was on the defensive. It's not you, it's me, she cried. And each time her weapon came down, torrents of blood, or tomato, it was hard to tell, splattered everything. They rolled again when Peter was able to get a hold of a raw schnitzel and shove it into her face. And then again, when she managed to can opener his ear. And on it went, until they both flopped onto the kitchen floor, gasping for breath, covered in cuts and bruises and meat. Truce, he wheezed. Yeah, she managed, and then coughed. I thought killing was supposed to get easier after the first one. Hey, do you smell that? Eileen sniffed. Is something burning? Laboriously, they both sat up and found their kitchen to be on fire. The worst of the blaze was their table, which had been covered in Sophie's dry old contracts, Eileen's liquor, and Peter's lit cigarette. Oh, hell, he muttered as the flames drew closer. Then they both screamed for help. Sophie ignored them at first, because their drama was just too much, and nowhere near as interesting as TV. But it grated on her enough that she finally rose off the couch. By then, the kitchen was a conflagration, with nary any raw meat in sight. Neither schnitzel nor Peter and Eileen. Damn it, she said, planting her hands on her hips. You two are just the worst. And then she exploded into a cloud of sulfur and flame, and the house burned down. Silence of the full moon. Life is full of stressors. Monotonous jobs whose days make the worker feel as if trapped in a singular moment in time. Bills that reach up to your neck. And of course, the noise. When the noise can get so loud and so invasive, it feels as if ants are crawling over the surface of your brain. That is what Sarah felt. She had moved to the big city just over 3 months ago with the promise of a new job. But lately, she felt that it was all becoming too much for her, and she decided to use her accrued days off and try out a silent retreat that had been advertised around town. She had looked into this place, and she thought it sounded exotic. This retreat was apparently an old mansion that was once occupied by a wealthy family up until the 90s. Not long after the passing of the husband and wife who lived there, their son, named Dorian Crowley, inherited the massive house and, instead of living in it, had turned it into a silent retreat for anyone looking for such a luxury. Sarah couldn't find much information on this latest owner of the mansion, other than he seemed to live a reclusive life and had a mindset of what most would call a progressive, vegan diet, spiritual health, inner peace, and the works. At least that's how she grasped it. Sarah wasn't too big on that herself, but didn't fault anyone for that lifestyle. Besides, she was currently looking for that exact lifestyle for her getaway weekend. So maybe the owner of this retreat might be on to something. Sarah arrived at this rustic manor early in the morning on a Saturday, and she was struck breathless. The manor was Victorian style, with what looked like several rooms, almost each with its own balcony for the tenant to step out and enjoy the fresh air, which was aplenty, as the building itself was surrounded by a thick and vibrant forest. Sarah couldn't see the slightest sign of civilization peeking through these dense trees as they seemingly engulfed the property. There was an eerie quiet surrounding the place, but Sarah had to remind herself that this was to be expected, as of the nature of this excursion. She realized that, though she'd grown to hate the constant noise and hustle of city life, she had also grown used to it, and would have to get over this irrational sense of unease in this place of silent tranquility and embrace it for what it was meant to be. She walked through the front door, and she saw a wooden podium with a log book resting on it. Behind the podium was a remarkably tall man, standing at least 6'7", whose skin was so pale that Sarah wondered if he had ever felt the rays of the sun. This doorman had a name tag on his red vest, which read Dorian, and she thought about asking in a joking way if he had any relation to the Dorian Crowley, who now owned this building. But after registering his stern, expressionless face with the silencing gesture, she decided against it. She opened her mouth to greet him, but before a sound escaped, this doorman raised a long and pointed finger to to his lips. He kept an overall stoic expression as he did so, though his eyes grew big as they bore into her own. She stopped herself and nodded, and slowly closed the door behind her out of respect for the other guests at the retreat, though this produced the opposite effect that she had wanted, as it creaked loudly like an irate cat as it inched slowly towards the latch. She winced. Looking up at the doorman, however, his face didn't move, not a single muscle, as the creaky door performed its symphony. He only looked at her in that expressionless, blank way with wide eyes, that finger stuck to his lips as if his boss had glued it there. Undeterred and remaining in character, Sarah tiptoed up to the man. She mumbled. Sarah Whitley? For Saturday at 9? The doorman slowly lowered his finger. His finger moved so slackening down from his lips to the notebook before him that Sarah was starting to worry that she might expect a charge for checking in late, even though she had arrived half an hour earlier than scheduled. After Sarah felt like she had considerably aged, the doorman had written a check mark in one of the blank boxes next to her name. He then raised his other hand, a little quicker this time, thank God, and made a gesture representing one corner of a box. Sarah raised an eyebrow at him, then gasped and mouthed right. At him. She produced her driver's license from her wallet in her purse. The sluggish doorman peered at it, and, in his own character, nodded very, very slowly in confirmation. He made a second check mark on the sheet before him. He reached down into a compartment within the podium and produced a small piece of paper. Sarah took it and saw it read, Sarah Whitley, room number 19, third door on the right, after climbing the stair. Sarah certainly found this entire experience to be a bit odd, and wondered if all silent retreats acted this way. Of course, she didn't know, so she simply nodded at the doorman and mouthed thanks to this shallow doorman. She followed her small instructions as guided until she found her room in number 19. The door thankfully closed silently behind her, this time as she dropped her bag to the floor. She decided to unpack that later, as she wanted simply just to plop on the bed in this decent-sized room and let out a long sigh, like in a movie. And she did just that. She let several moments pass by until she finally opened her eyes and observed her surroundings. She saw the room was mostly kept tidy and uninspired, but there had been various knickknacks spread throughout the place that resembled the moon. Some of them were half moons, or waxed or waned moons, but the majority of them were full moons. She thought this was also a bit peculiar, but knew that the moon was symbolical for inner peace, and let thought nothing else of it. Most of that morning and afternoon was spent as the afternoon suggested. Meditation, reading, and focusing on a hobby such as art. It truly was a relaxing day for Sarah, as she found this to be exactly as unwinding as advertised. She stepped out on the balcony attached to her room and watched the sunset as it calmly rolled behind the horizon. Through all this time, she did not utter a single word and heard nothing, from words to electronics to a simple sneeze from any of her neighboring patrons here. It was in all ways she could imagine a peaceful day. Later, after watching the last flickers of light from the sunset, Sarah moved to the bathroom and relieved herself, washed her hands, and brushed her teeth. She laid her head down on the mass of pillows on her bed with a sigh loaded with tranquility. She lay there for a few minutes until she felt herself begin to drift off into sleep. But just before she drifted totally into a REM cycle, she heard her neighboring tenant snore loudly. That in itself wasn't an issue, as it didn't bother her. But what was unnerving was the animalistic howl that followed soon after. Sarah darted upright in her bed, looking out the window, wondering if she would spot the creature that made the noise. She now heard rustling in the room next to hers. Someone just stood up and out of bed, and they accidentally knocked something over. At the sound of something that thumped on the floor in the neighboring room, the howl sounded again. Only now, Sarah could tell that the howl was inside the building. The sound of rushing, padded thumps raced up the stairs. A wolf broke into the building, Sarah thought frantically to herself. She expected to soon hear the sound of paws rustling against the door next over. But instead, what she heard was a key jingling in a lock. Sarah held her breath, making every conscious effort not to make a sound. The neighboring door now swung open, and Sarah heard a blood-curdling scream come from the next room over. "No! No, 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 no!" their voice pleaded. They were answered with a tremendous growl that made Sarah's spine chatter from her pelvis up to her jawline, and now understood why frightened characters' teeth chatter in a cartoon. Sarah heard a struggle in the room beside her, as she could hear things being knocked from shelves and shattering on the floor. And now, a mixed sound of thump, 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 paired with what Sarah could only describe as something being drug through the doorway and out into the hallway. Sarah stood up from her bed, and despite all her instincts yelling at her to cease, she slowly turned the doorknob of her room. Quietly as she could, she peered her head out into the hallway. In the light of the moon piercing through the hallway window, she beheld a sight that she didn't know how to comprehend. In the hallway was what looked like a wolf with red eyes that almost glowed in the moonlight. This wolf was standing on its hind legs, though it had an elongated torso that reached so far up its head, almost brushed against the ceiling. Wrapped around the chest of this wolfish creature was a stretched and torn red vest, which had pinned to it a plastic name tag that read Dorian. Below this monster was the limp body of a middle-aged man with a round and plumb belly with a bleeding laceration in his temple. This man whom the wolf creature was dragging across the floor by his ankles. Sarah gasped in astonishment, then raised a hand to her mouth to silence herself, though she knew already she was too late. Her eyes bulged as she watched the wolfman's eyes dart up to match her own. They stared into each other for what felt like an eternity, until the creature raised one gnarled claw to its mouth and made a sickeningly human shush motion before it looked back down to its victim and continued to drag it down the hallway and then down the stairs, the unfortunate man's head making a nauseating thump with every stair it collided with as they both descended. Sarah coughed back a scream as she flew the door shut in front of her and rushed to a corner in her room below the window. Despite her hands, which now cusped over her ears, she heard that reverberating howl around the thick trees outside, which was followed only once by a scream by the newly awakened victim of the wolfman, a scream that was cut short with a blood-curdling gurgle. Chomp, chomp, chomp. The noises that followed. Sarah felt sick to her stomach, but was too terrified to move from her spot. Part of her knew that was useless, as this monster had already seen her in this room. But the rest of her demanded that she stay perfectly still in this one spumba, out of view, but out of scent. There she sat, huddled for the rest of the night. When the first light of the sunrise had peeked through her window, she gathered up her things and rushed downstairs, ignorant of the unwritten house rules of silence, as her bag thumped down the stairs. Thump, 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 it went. And with every thump, she thought of that poor man's head as he was dragged down. She made it to the doorman and sputtered quickly. "Checking out early, thank you." But with her hand holding the door open, she stopped in her tracks, swiveling her head around to look at the doorman, who hadn't yet made a note of her early departure. It was the same man as yesterday, and instead of writing anything down in the notebook before him, he kept that same solemn and silent expression with the bulging eyes glaring at her as he raised a long and gnarled finger to his lips, giving her the shush gesture. Sarah glanced down at his vest, this one for today, now a sky blue, with a name tag which read Dorian. Her eye twitched at him as her hand trembled on the door. She opened her mouth to say something, but all she could muster was a weak groan. She darted out the open door and towards her car. She could feel his eyes digging into the back of her as she ran, though she never looked back. To this day, Sarah never went to another silent retreat, yet had refrained from making a single sound at night, especially on nights like that one, where the moon was full and the silence could be cut with a single howl.